Okay, so I'd like to welcome everybody to the January meeting for the Society for Technical Communication Florida chapter. I'm Alex Garcia. I'm currently one of the directors for the chapter. I did want to go over some housekeeping before we get to our program. So I'm going to share my screen real quick. So I hope you can see my screen. You can connect with us via our Facebook group, our Facebook page, or our website. We do invite you to connect with us. We do have 2 upcoming meetings already planned. The first one coming up on Friday, February 25th, 2022, and that will be our annual FTC STC joint meeting. It's a tradition that's gone back to approximately 2003, and at this meeting we will be celebrating the 20th anniversary of the Future Technical Communicators Club at UCF, and we hope to have alumni from the club come back and tell us what's been going on in their lives since college. So I hope you can join us. I know it's a non-traditional meeting day, but that's the best day that was for the students. So hope you can join us on Friday, the 25th of February. And then the next meeting in March, we have Barry Byron from EncoDev, EncoDev Manager at Tendermint. She's going to give us a background on crypto and blockchain and answer all your questions. And I know, Jessica, you wanted to solicit some questions for this, so I'll turn the floor to you.
Thank you, Alex. I just put my email in the chat. Yeah, this meeting was born out of all of us having a discussion one day and all of us realizing we really have no idea what it is, or some people who do know what it is. It's one of those, if you've ever had a conversation about crypto and blockchain, it just seems to go round and round. And there seems to be a lot of opportunities for tech writers in it too. So there may be, although I would have to understand it to know what those opportunities would be. So I know Nancy, I was just thinking of you because I know Nancy has tried to explain it to me a few times and I still, I'm not sure. So what I'm doing is, I have questions, I'm gathering them. Alex had mentioned a question he had for me. So I'm going to just basically compile them. I'll send them to her so she can, we can have a focused discussion. But other than that, we're just going to go over the answer to the questions. So if you want to email me, like if you think of something and say, hey, I'd love to ask this of a person who knows about it. Oh, and just so that Barry, Tendermint is a blockchain company. They make blockchain technology. So she's right in the thick of it. And she's the head of the content. She's the content manager for all of it. So she's in the technology, she's in the industry. So that's why we chose her. And she's also a past president of a former chapter here in Florida. So we all know Barry very well. So just if you ever think of something, feel free to email me and I'm just going to compile questions because beyond, can I buy anything? I really don't know what to ask.
And if you don't know Barry, she's a wonderful speaker and she has a presence about her that's unequaled by anybody.
Yes. And by the way, you just reminded me of something, Lori. I haven't even had the chance to communicate this to anyone. She is, she's actually very excited because she's constantly fielding questions. They're trying to figure out what people's questions are, to gather user feedback. What do people wonder? That's so vital to a role as tech writers. And I was like, great, we can help you out with that. So it's don't be shy because they want to know what people don't know.
Yep. So be on the lookout there. Be on the lookout for information on how to sign up for those 2 meetings. And Amy, I'm not sure if you wanted to give us a little bit of background of what FTC is doing this semester as we get closer to that joint meeting.
Sure. We've got a great kickoff to this semester for FTC. We have our general body meetings on Fridays. Nope. yeah, on Fridays at 6 o'clock. We've got some different speakers lined up throughout the semester. So the next meeting is tomorrow. We will have UCF alum John Paz. So he'll be joining us for a question and answer session. And then, like you mentioned, the FTC STC joint meeting is at the end of February, and we're very excited to welcome back some past members and just hear how everybody's doing. So if you want to find out more about what the club is up to, we've got the website, futuretechnicalcommunicators.com. We're also on everything, Discord and Facebook and Instagram and all the platforms. So
Thank you so much. And without any further ado, I will cede the floor to Sarah Baca, who is our former vice president of the chapter, treasurer of the chapter, and lately she's been in all things Agile and Scrum. So welcome back, Sarah. So I'll stop sharing so that you can start sharing yours.
Thank you. Oh, it says it doesn't want to let me. Do you need to make me a co-host or something?
Yeah, let me see.
I need the power.
And here comes John. Welcome, John. I'll make you a host.
Okay, now it will work. Great, thank you. Can you all see that slide? There's an introduction.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Very cool. So I thought I would start with just a quick introduction about myself because I've not been hanging out with you all for a little bit. My name is Sarah, and I went to UCF and graduated with my degree in technical communication back in 2011. And I was very involved in FTC and then STC for a few years until I became a Scrum Master for our documentation team, and then became a Scrum Master at the company that I was at. And I think the skills are very complementary because being able to communicate well is very, very important for working with any team, right? As you all know, but especially teams that are agile and have to collaborate frequently. This is a picture of my family. My husband had 3 kids from his first marriage, and then we have 3 together. So there's 6 altogether. And I also thought I'd mention that I started going back to UCF last year to get my master's in social work because I'm hoping to do leadership stuff that kind of crosses the boundary into therapy beyond coaching. I'm really fascinated in emotional intelligence and like what helps people tick and how they communicate with each other and work with each other. So I'm really interested in the psychology angle. So that has been the latest thing that's been keeping me busy. All right, so we are going to start talking about values. Values are defined here as something that is a principle or quality that's intrinsically valuable or desirable. And if you have those PDFs, let us know. If you don't, Alex put them in chat earlier. You can look at that list of values and think about which ones are important to you. If you're willing and able to turn your camera on, that would be really awesome because we're going to put you in breakout groups. You can talk about which values are important to you and why. So take a minute to look through that list. You can circle the ones that seem especially important to you. Then let me stop sharing. I've lost my mouse. There it is. I'm trying to figure out how to end the screen share. It doesn't want to let me stop it.
So it should be at the towards the top. There we go.
Thank you. Sorry. We use WebEx at work, and so I've lost my Zoom skills. Okay, so can we put them into groups of 4, Alex?
Let me figure
Or
that
3?
out. It's fairly new that we have our paid account, so let me figure out the how to do that.
Did you make me a co-host?
That might be part of the webinar aspect of it.
I have a paid Zoom and I use it. Should.
Let me use the search feature.
Sorry, everybody, didn't think to plan for that part. While we're figuring out the technology, go ahead and look at your value sheet and cross out the ones that don't seem important to you, circle the ones that do. Usually there's a button at the bottom that just says breakouts. Oh, maybe it's not enabled on the account. Okay, we can just go ahead and do it as a big group. It just won't give everybody a chance to talk. It won't be quite as much fun. So does anybody care to share which values were important to them? Which ones weren't?
I'm not finished going through the list.
Okay, thanks, Lori. We'll give you a few minutes. It is a long list.
I'll start. I think I like all of them, but in a quick walk through the list, I've ended up marking commitment, cooperation, honesty, humor, integrity, loyalty, and truth. At least in terms of working with employees back in my previous career, follow through, completion, and personal loyalty are things that I tended to value very highly. And I guess they stand out in terms of things that still matter.
Yeah.
Okay,
Why do you think they matter to you? Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Alex.
I saved the settings, so you might have the breakout rooms available now. I'm not sure. Double check.
Yeah. No, I don't see it.
Okay, so it might be for the next time that we meet.
Yeah.
But I think a group meeting, a group discussion is fine.
Yeah.
I have a longer list than WC.
Can you pick like a top few?
Well, it's not that long a list, but it's a longer list than WC. I have authenticity, connection, contentment, contribution, cooperation, friendship, grace and gratitude, harmony and health, honesty, humility, humor, kindness, reliability, resourcefulness, safety and security, truth, wholeheartedness, and wisdom. Oh, and teamwork. I skipped that one, sorry.
Right.
I think teamwork's over.
Why do you think? Why do you think those are important to you, Lori?
Because it brings everything together. And they all work together. And when all those things happen together, life is good.
Yeah.
No, I agree. So I had accountability, authenticity, courage, dignity, perseverance, and family, and vulnerability. Because sometimes you got to put yourself out there. So
Great, thanks for sharing, Alex.
mhm.
When we're
Stir-
talking about
Yeah.
values, are we talking about values, our own personal values, or things that we value for the workplace or generally in life, which?
Your own personal values is what I was thinking, but that's an
Okay.
important
Yeah.
Okay,
clarification.
because
Would
I was
those be-
thinking like patriotism. I feel very patriotic, but I don't think that that's part of my career.
Yeah. Do you think they'd be different depending on the environment, Karen?
Depending on the context, definitely, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I have family values that are important in my home and with my relatives
Mhm.
and my loved ones. And I have a work ethic that's important when I'm working on a project and when I'm working with a team and when I'm dealing with other people in a professional capacity. It's, I mean, there might be some overlap, but
Yeah.
you know, things that like patriotism or there were a few that just, you know, they might be things in my personal life that I would value, but they wouldn't particularly be something I would bring into my professional life at all.
Right. And I think that's a really great point.
Yeah. I was thinking
Yeah.
more in terms of the job and workplace. I mean, like somebody said earlier, all of them apply. So it's like, oh gosh, which ones you pick, the ones that just hit you quickly. And those were the ones like creativity is in both personal and work life. In work life, some job security sometimes is a good thing, sometimes not actually, but commitment, you know, everybody contributing, honesty, some recognition. Everybody should trust each other too. Work team.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only ones that I haven't, I mean, I've marked a lot of the same ones you guys did. The only ones that I marked that I didn't hear yet, and it was community competence, community compassion and competence. So those are the ones that
Great.
jumped out at me right away. And that's in every context, I think.
Yeah.
And maybe patience for the incompetent people.
That's a good point. Some people are learning, but some people have a harder time or don't fit in well. May have been misplaced in the group. And
Well, also I was evaluating a resume from, well, it doesn't even matter, but I was trying to explain to my boss in so many words what I found wrong with the writing sample, and he summed it up nicely by saying, so basically you're saying you can't teach common sense? And I was like, yes. That's basically what I'm saying. Because I was thinking how much I would have to teach that person.
Important value. Yeah. Anyone else care to share which one's more important to them?
I selected patience. I selected several, but I was thinking of patience with working with people, but also patience with the process, especially if you're talking about learning a new system or teaching somebody. And then I think courage and vulnerability and trust, building trust is important to, I think, be an effective individual and an effective team. Safety, physical safety, but also just feeling safe with the general environment and the people that you're working with, mentally, emotionally, and then honesty and resourcefulness. Those were some of the top ones that stood out to me.
Thank you, Amy.
I also had a few. Well, I actually selected a lot. There's too many good ones on here.
Yeah.
So I ended up, yeah, I have way too many that I circle, but the top ones I'd say are authenticity. I think I mentioned before, but just, yeah, being authentic is just something I value. And especially if working on a team and just like, or working with anybody, authenticness and also openness too. That's a great one. Humility, kindness, learning, and what other one? And creativity too. I also like that one. But before I list like 10 more, also vulnerability. I think Alex mentioned that one earlier, but I think that one's a good one too.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Yeah.
One of the ones that I didn't like, two of the ones that I didn't particularly like were balance, beauty, because I wasn't quite sure what the heck that was. Or balance and beauty must be two different things. That's what it is, I think came out. And being the best, I think that's not a value to me. The value to me would be ensuring everybody is the best they can be. But personally, for me to be the best would mean that everybody is being the best.
Oh, that's a great call out, Lori. Are there any of these that you think are especially true for technical communicators?
Teamwork.
Absolutely. Teamwork, patience, understanding.
Collaboration.
Order.
Right.
Yep. And I think Lori Meyer would like me to see a recognition. She likes to recognize people.
That's a Mike Murray thing too. Yeah, ethics, inclusion, cooperation, teamwork.
Learning, especially if tossed into a new field.
Absolutely. Be constantly learning, right?
Yep.
I think to be a good technical communicator. Does anyone else who hasn't yet spoken up want to share their values? I know we had some great ones in chat too. No? Okay, thanks everyone for being willing to explore different values. The reason that we talked about our personal values and values for technical communication is because Agile, big A, Agile, is founded in 4 different values, and you have space on your worksheet if you want to type in it or write on it to write the colored parts there. So the 4 values of the Agile Manifesto are individuals and interactions over process and tools. Anyone want to tell me what they think that means? Individuals and interactions over process and tools.
I think it's funny that it says that because I feel like it's the opposite when I'm working in this Agile team. It's more process and tools before you get to the individuals and interactions.
I agree with that. In my experience with the last team, yes. What you just said. They were so focused on process that they discussed process and debated it nearly daily before we actually got to work some days.
Oh,
You know, I
dear.
think it's, for me, this means that you don't minimize the need for important, efficient, smooth processes. It's just that the processes themselves cannot be the end. They need to be the means to an end. So processes and tools need to
Love that.
support the individuals.
Lori, we lost you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear.
Okay. We need the processes and the tools to support the goals of the team and the individual contributors to the team. So I'm not sure if it's individuals and interactions over processes and tools. I think it means that you have to prevent processes and tools from superseding the needs of the individuals and teams.
Mm-hmm. That's great, Lori Meyer. Yeah, in
Well, the
the
thing-
original way that, real quick, in the
Sorry.
original way that it's written, they have individuals and interactions on the left. Your left would be over here probably, and then process and tools on the right. And at the bottom it says, well, there's values and the items on the right, we value the items on the left more. So just like you said, Lori, process and tools is important, but what's more important is the people. People over process.
Yeah,
Somebody was
I
gonna say
think,
something?
yeah, I was going to say, having worked on multiple Agile teams, that I find, and Sarah, this may be where your feedback is, your experience is invaluable, but I seem to think that a lot of times when the problem is individuals and interactions, we talk about the process. Like I've worked on teams where they just keep changing the Agile process, and we keep saying, well, let's do this kind of sprint, let's do that kind of sprint, and it doesn't change the fact that the same people are not communicating, or, you know, and then you see the
That's a
same
great point.
problems in the new process. And so it's sort of, I think the process and the tools become a way to sort of not deal with the individuals and interactions, if that makes any sense. I think
It's a
it
really
becomes
deep
inverted.
observation. Totally. Rather than have a difficult conversation, we try to add more process to make people do things, right?
Yeah.
Really common in organizations.
I would agree with
We'll add
that.
another Jira field to make them do this. Yep. Sorry, go ahead, Denise.
Yep, I agree with you. They just don't see the individuals and what they can contribute and what their strengths and weaknesses are. Because they're so focused on the process. That was just my experience. And again,
Yeah,
I
I
don't
think
know
it's a
much.
really common experience.
Yeah,
But if you go by the heart of what Agile is supposed to be, it's supposed to be about people, not process. So if that's not happening, then I think it's fair to say that we're not following Agile as it could be. And also, it's not fun and it's painful for everyone involved, I think. Okay, so the next one, if you want to fill out on your worksheet as well, is working software over comprehensive documentation. I want to clarify, like in big bold letters, comprehensive documentation is process documentation, like processing workflows and deliverables and milestones and traditional project management documentation. If you're talking the type of documentation that I imagine most of you do, that is part of working software because it's a user manual or it's a way to help people understand how to use the software that they've purchased. It is part of the product. So the type of technical writing that I think most of you and I did and do is the working software part of that equation, not the comprehensive documentation. The point is that the value is in what you get out to the customer over whatever you planned to get out to the customer. You can have a 2,000-page planning document for a lot of projects that is just complete waste of time and energy that nobody follows. And so that's what they were trying to get at here, was instead of talking about the software you're going to deliver, just do it and then get feedback, and then do more and then get feedback. It's a different way of working versus a great big planning phase with big process documentation, then implementation and testing and release.
Yeah.
That's too slow.
yeah,
It's hard to- Oh, go ahead.
software evolves so much that I was told this in the last team, you know, that I was actually chastised for writing too much about processes, but I was training myself and I needed to do that to train myself. And then I didn't need those
Totally.
notes after a point involved. And a lot of already came with documentation.
Makes sense.
You know, I think in terms of working software, I think the way that software works and the workflow should be somewhat evident to the target audience. They may not know everything and they may need to be guided with some documentation, but there should be some sense among the target audience of how this is going to work. And a lot of you might have seen a lot of the same type of process documentation that I have seen where there are these diagrams that are just so complicated. You've got arrows going back and forth and decision points everywhere. And it's just like, it just makes your eyes glaze over. And that's a clear indication that there's a complexity issue. And so
Right.
it's just, so I think what this point means to me is that somehow the way software works has to be, evident enough so that the user gets some sense of how things are, where the beginning is and where the end is, with some guidance that can take them clearly through the process, without having to look at pages of text and sections and subsections. And if you do this, then do these 3 steps, and then do these 3 sub-steps. And then, that if that's how the process is evolving, then, it really has to be
An
looked at.
alarm sign.
Yeah.
Yep. Great addition, Lori. Thanks. Yep. And then the third value in the Agile Manifesto is customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So back in the day, they used to spend lots of time negotiating contracts with customers and defining what the deliverables would be and the milestones and all of the dates. And so this revolutionized the industry because it talked about working with the customer to redefine what you were going to deliver and what you were going to build together, and do that iteratively rather than defining it all up front. And we know now with how quickly technology evolves and changes, like every other day something new is coming out, some new technology, right? That it makes a lot more sense to collaborate and work over things again and again rather than spend a long time trying to negotiate what you're going to do. Again, that idea of building something small and then getting feedback. You can write that on your paper, customer collaboration. And then the last one is responding to change over following a plan. And similar to the other ones that we talked about, where you might have on a traditional project, big flow diagrams like Lori was talking about, and thousands of pages of process documentation. Rather than that, you accept whatever change is coming at the latest point possible, and then you adapt because the market changes quickly, what your customer needs changes quickly. So you want to be able to respond quickly to what is needed. Because if you don't respond for a year, guess what? Your competitor's already done it and you're out of business. So a big part of agility is supposed to be responding to change over following a plan. You can write down that responding to change on the worksheet. What questions do you all have about the 4 values of the Agile Manifesto?
Are Scrum Masters and other people who are being trained to lead, agile process meetings, things like that, are they expected to be trained in understanding these 4 concepts? And, are there, there must be formal agile training programs. I have never been in one myself, although I've been in tons and tons of Scrums. So, for the people who lead these things and Scrum Masters and, getting certification maybe as a Scrum Master, is this something that they have to have a thorough understanding of and demonstrate that understanding in some way?
Hopefully. I think you all know probably better than I do that some organizations provide lots of training and some just kind of throw you in and say, good luck, you've got this. So it depends, right, on which company you're with. There are a lot of Scrum Master certifications. Scrum is one of the Agile methodologies, but it's not the only one. It is the most popular one. We'll touch on it a little bit later. But you can think of Agile as kind of an umbrella, actually maybe better as a foundation. Like the Agile Manifesto, and then there's also 12 principles is supposed to be the foundation of the different processes that go on top. But Agile is supposed to be the basics of how companies are supposed to work. And to the point of many people here, it's often not what happens in reality. And sometimes people really get stuck in process, or companies still feel like they need to document, especially if you're talking large enterprises. But, this is how it's supposed to be. Did that answer your question well enough, Lori?
Yeah, that provides some good insights, and the other thing I think that happens in companies a lot of times is they kind of come up with their own mixture of what Agile means in their organization. They might have like, kind of a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of the old waterfall process kind of thrown in there. So
Right.
sometimes it's, kind of a mixed bag. You go to company A and they do it one way, company B does it another way.
Yeah, that's true. And just like your values are inherent to who you are, like if collaboration was really important to you or authenticity, that's part of the filter that you see the world through, and that's part of what's important to you and part of the foundation of who you are, like as a human and how you process things. That's how these values are supposed to be with teams, that you understand the importance of people and the importance of building the software and getting it out there. That's why these values are so important and why I wanted to make sure we spent a lot of time on them, because the rest is all about process and how you're supposed to do things. Process is just the way people work. And really what this is about is culture. And I know a lot of people talked about trust and collaboration. That all depends on the culture of the team and the culture of the company. And if you don't have that, then Agile simply doesn't work well. And then you end up with, Agile pretending to be Agile. It's not really what we talked about.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to understand Agile and like what it is. And I'm new to the field, so I don't have experience like developing software or working in a lot of different companies in this way. So this sounds like it's project oriented. So is Agile an approach that you would take to doing a task or a project? And then I guess my question is, and then what? I watched the 3-minute video and it was really helpful, but the idea of constantly doing 2-week sprints sounds unsustainable and exhausting. So I didn't know, is that the pace? But then I thought, well, maybe that's what people in that side of business, that's the pace that you're accustomed to working at. You just work really, really hard for 2 weeks and then you take a breath and then you do it really hard again for 2 weeks. So I don't know if this question is making any sense, but
yeah, it totally does.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I think it's that you do they're 2-week sprints, but there are a set of 7 2-week sprints for an epic. So that you have, what it does is it divides the project into smaller bits that are doable. So if somebody's setting them up so that they can't be done, then that's not a good sprint. So it should work with the system that you're using. Did that help,
is
Sarah?
it another way? Is it kind of like setting benchmarks? It's just another way of talking about it.
Kinda, sorta. But the other thing is, at the end of each sprint, we have a team meetings and we show what we've done. So everybody on the team can see what's been done and identify other things that need to be done and write up another task to do to
we'll
work
go over
with
that a little later.
It's different than
having
in the olden days, we used to have business requirements and there would be one person who wrote the entire project and it was all done up front. Well, now it kind of builds on itself.
Okay. Thank you. This is helpful. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Amy, you might be too young, but used to you would buy software like at the store in a box, and it would be a bunch of floppy disks or CDs, and you would put it in your computer. And so they would have, like Lori was saying, a big design phase where they would write all the how it's supposed to look and all the business requirements, like Lori was saying. And it would be like a fat manual of all of the things that the software was supposed to do. And then they would pitch that over a fence to the developers who would then write the code without actually talking to any users or getting any feedback. And then they would kind of pitch that over a fence to get tested. So there wasn't communication and collaboration between these groups. And then like 2 years later, the software would be done. And so this group of developers got together to write the Agile Manifesto and the 12 principles that go with it, to basically say, instead of doing that in 2-year increments or whatever, we're going to do that in little bits and then show it to the customer and get feedback and then do another little bit to build on that bit. So it is a type of project management, and we'll go over Scrum, which is the most popular methodology within agility. Like these values were the foundation of that. And it's as much about culture as it is about project management in my mind. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. It was a great question. Okay, so I'm watching time and I want to make sure that this doesn't turn into a sleepover. So I think we should skip this one. And then I do want to cover this slide a little bit because I love it. And I think it might address Amy's question a little bit about like how all of this fits together. Yes, it's not as, hopefully you can see it. Okay, I'll send the slides out as well, of course. So we talked about mindset and culture, and then the 4 values that we went over, like people over process. And then that becomes 12 principles, which we can cover at the end, which becomes practices. So just like if you value, let's say you value collaboration and I'm working on a document I'm writing, instead of doing it by myself, I might say, hey, Karen, can you look at this and tell me if it makes sense? So collaboration is a value, so then my behavior shows that value. So that's what this is saying, is that once you really understand the values of agility, then it affects your behavior and becomes practices, some of which could be Scrum, like what Lori was talking about, and we'll also touch on Kanban, which is another methodology under the Agile umbrella. Is that making sense so far? Everybody? Okay.
Yep, makes sense.
Now our next exercise is on the handout. So what's the order? And this is one I was hoping I could pop everybody into breakout groups to work on. Why don't we take just like a minute to read over the list of things? And you don't need to know any terminology. Just think about what order would you do these things in? What's the order with the lines beside it? This part.
I don't have that.
Alex, can you put it in the chat again?
Sure.
You.
That
It's
was-
the
I think that was the-
note-taking thing,
I
right?
think that was the point when I said I was going to type stuff. So I didn't realize I was going to have something done. There we go.
Oh. You just write them on a piece of paper while looking at it. I can share it if that's helpful.
No, that's okay. I got it.
Okay.
There it is.
Has everybody had a chance to read it over? We can work on it together.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. So if you look at this list, which one do you think you would do first? Any guesses?
I always think about my audience, right? So I'm thinking create a list of what the customer wants.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so let's put a 1 by that one. That's what I put too, so that makes it the right answer. Okay, so then after you create it.
Oh, sorry. I was jumping in number 2. Sorry.
Yeah, go for it. What do you think number 2 is?
I was going to say ask questions about items on the list.
Yep.
Yep, that's what I
Yes.
put. Yep. This is not rocket science, right? You create a list of what the customer wants and then you ask them questions about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I had that under research and interview. To determine
What
the
did you have,
function.
Denise?
I had like determine the need, research and interview.
It's not on the
Oh,
list.
yeah.
So what? I don't know if I have the list, sorry.
See?
Ah,
It's the handout, the note-taking device that Alex attached
oh, okay. Yep. I
in the
got-
chat.
Sorry.
But I like how you translated it. That's what a technical writer would do, right? You do
Yep,
some research and that's great. I love it.
I'm not sure if work on items on the list comes first and then while working, the team talks each day.
And it seems like that should be fairly high on the list to engage everybody as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm. There's one that says before starting the work, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my next one.
Oh, okay.
Plan for the
starting
next
work,
2
you
weeks.
can- Anybody have a guess for number 4?
Well, you could do 3A, which is take bets on which ones will carry over to the next sprint.
Very important step.
So I would say get to
And-
work. Work on the
Yep,
items.
work on items in the list. Yep. That's what I had
And
to.
4 and 5 kind of go together. I mean, while working, kind of go together.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you're working on a
And
list,
so,
and then you're talking each day.
Although where I work, we've decided that it's way too many meetings, so we do it about 3 times a week.
Whatever works. Yep. So we've got 1 through 5. What about number 6?
it would have to be show the work that you did to the customer.
Mm-hmm.
But
Even if
We
the customer's
do-
internal, we do
Mm.
demos.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have
Hopefully
Yeah,
it's
that-
internal first. Sorry.
I would
Go ahead,
say
Alex.
at the end, after you're done, discuss what went well. So your after action review or postmortem or whatever you want to call it.
Mhm.
Yeah, we have a I guess a Scrum page. I don't know what they call it, but anyway, what to continue, what to stop doing, and what to start doing.
Yep.
That's a typical retrospective format. So for those of you who haven't worked on a Scrum team before, did this process make sense? Like what you do in what order? You might work on a project the same way, right? If it was like a school project or a work project and you were working with other people, you go through what do I have to do in the project and then talk about it, ask questions maybe with the professor if you have any, work on it together, update each other. It's really just a similar logical process. So,
I was
but
gonna
because
ask
we are
that-
fancy, yeah, go ahead.
Now, this may be the next thing you cover, but part of discussing or putting the list together, when you talk, I believe it's the step about discuss what you're going to do in the next 2 weeks. A lot of that is estimating how much time things are going to
Mhm.
take. That's how you determine, that's how you finalize the list, I think, is how long things are going to take.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of controversial. We could talk about it.
Yeah, I know. That's why I was hesitant
Yeah.
about bringing
One
it
of
up.
the things we add to it is what everybody's availability is.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's for planning it out.
for planning, and we assign points to each task. So it's 1, 3, or 5 points, depending on how long it would take to get that item done.
Yeah.
And that's just the development of
So-
it, not the testing of it, just for each person who's working on it, what
Oh,
their
wow,
point value
interesting.
would be.
Okay, so what we discussed, because we're fancy and we like to feel like we are professionals, we give everything fancy names, and that's what Scrum is. So it's really just those 7 steps that you came up with on your worksheet, but it has all of these different titles. So the product backlog is that list of things to do, and your product owner is one of the people on the team who represents the customer. They put those things in order with the most important thing on the top of the list. So the team takes the next thing off the top of the list. Then you plan what you're going to do during the sprint, which is the time box, like you were talking about, Amy. 2 weeks is common on a lot of teams. It can, according to the Scrum guide, which is like the Scrum Bible, it can be anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks. Most teams I've worked with do 2. And then the team works on it, which I think was our step. I don't remember. One of our steps, the team works on it. And then that daily Scrum, that's that little bubble right above the circle, that's a meeting that can happen every day, or like Lori said, some teams do it less often, where you meet with each other and talk about, hey, I'm working on this widget and it's going to need to plug into Amy's other widget. Amy, are you almost done with your widget? Does it have the spiky part in it? Yeah, okay, great, they'll fit together. You know, like we really coordinate and work with each other, just like construction workers getting ready to work on a site over their coffee. They'll talk about which area of the construction site they're working on, just to talk to coordinate work. Then you deliver that piece of software in a little bit, like we said, not a great big chunk, but a little bit. And then during the sprint review is where you'll show the working software and get feedback on it from your product owner who's representing your customer. You might have other stakeholders in the company too who come check out what happened with the software, how it's working. If there are teams who are waiting for you to finish what you did, they might come and see what you did because their pieces need to plug into your pieces. And then the team talks about what worked well and what didn't work well in the sprint retrospective. And so that's that last step, which can be shockingly helpful if you've never done a retrospective after finishing a project or something. So this is what the Scrum process is. And there, like Lori was saying, there's other added bits that aren't officially part of the process that a lot of companies do. Like they estimate the work. The way that is supposed to happen is with story points, and it's supposed to be relative sizing for the whole team for the different units of work, which are called stories. But that's a whole lot of detail that doesn't matter. If you can understand this process, really, you can walk into any company as a technical writer, I think, and be able to attend your stand-ups and understand what you're going to need to be documenting that's coming up, because you'll have a good idea of kind of what you're in for. And then you can figure out the rest on the fly.
Yeah, I think you just kind of
Scrum in a
directed what
nutshell.
Jill was asking, because Jill's asking about how the tech writers, we have to get ourselves into these meetings so we see what's going on, because the JIRA tickets are not very complete frequently. But if you get involved with them while they're figuring it out and you hear what they're doing, you can do a better job at doing your tech writing. Yes, I am part of the team. My problem is I'm part on too many teams, and sometimes they meet at the same time. So
a lot.
I need to clone myself.
Yeah, when I was a technical writer, I was on 3 to 5 teams. It was tough, exactly. Yeah, it's impossible. And also another challenge of being on multiple teams is that you don't have that teaminess. You know, like everybody else is building relationships and they belong to each other, and we're on team tequila and we all know what we're working on. And when you float around all these different teams, like you're not team tequila, you're team tequila, vodka, and tonic, you know? And so like you don't really have that same cohesion with the team, but as technical writers, often you do get put on multiple teams. And I would argue that the biggest value that we bring, can I still say we? I could still say we, right? That we bring as technical writers on teams like this is the questions that we ask that force the developers to think about why they're building what they're building and who they're building it for. Because a lot of times they get so stuck in whatever code they're writing and what they're commenting and which object they're going to call and all this stuff about like the mechanics of it, because that's how their brains work, because they're good at that kind of thing, that they forget who the user is and what the user wants to do with it. And then if Lori's going up and saying, yo, dude, what is this supposed to do? How is this going to help the user? Then they go, oh yeah, I forgot about that part, you know? And it's a really
user perspective.
Huge value.
It's the user perspective that we bring. And I have implemented that a lot.
Believe it.
I've been able to implement it more now, because when we used to do with the business analysis and the business report, we didn't get it until much later in the system, now in the process. Now we're getting involved much earlier.
That's great. And every company does it different. The company that I'm at now, the teams will build the thing and then have the sprint review, and the technical writers will often come to the sprint review and then they'll document it after it's done. I feel like that loses a lot of value, but you know, I'm not queen of the universe, so I don't get a say in those things. But someday. So, but yeah, I think that's the most important things to say about that. So that is one framework that is within under that Agile umbrella, the 4 values that we talked about. There are many, many frameworks. Scrum is by far the most popular. It's like what 90% of the teams do. And then the second most popular is called Kanban. And oftentimes people use the skills together. So a lot of Scrum teams will have what's called a Kanban board, which will have like a to-do, a doing, and a done column, although it usually gets much more complicated because the tools have different processes and we just like to overcomplicate things. But visualizing the workflow so you know where it is in the process is a Kanban value, which is a different methodology than Scrum, but they kind of mix them up. So if you want to write it on your worksheet at the bottom, there's Kanban with a bunch of squares, and we're going to write each one of those in those boxes. So visualizing workflow is one of the values of Kanban. What this does is make it clear to everyone the status of things. So like back in the day when you worked on a big project, you'd have a project manager that would bug you frequently and say, hey, how's that going? Are you done with that yet? When are you going to be done? Is it almost done? How are you tracking? What about the other thing I told you to do? Now they have a board, theoretically, that they can look at if it's kept updated with the thing that you're working on and where it's at. So if you're writing a paper, you might have, like, it's in the outline phase. I'm creating an outline for my paper, and then I'm going to create a first draft, and then I'm going to create a second draft, and then I'm going to send it out for review and feedback, and then I'm going to make a final draft. Each one of those would be a column on your board so that you could see explicitly how things were going through each of those things. So if you want to, you can write in that first box, visualize workflow. And the benefit of that is that others can see what's going on and you can see too. Then the next step is one that teams really, really struggle with because it's so counterintuitive, and that's limit work in progress. It feels like the more things you work on at a time, the faster you'll get done, but the opposite is actually true. The less things you work on at a time, the faster they'll get done. If you think of it like a road with a couple of cars, those cars are going to go a lot faster than during rush hour traffic when there's 500 cars on that road, right? And so a lot of times, especially as teams, we think, I'll work on 5 units of work all at the same time so I can get it done really fast, and then things take forever and we can't figure out why. It's because you're losing time in context switching, you're not all focused on the same thing to get it through. And that can apply to your real life too, to focus on things and then you get them done faster. So the second concept is limit work in progress. Then next, so the third box, if you want to write it down, is measure and manage flow. Does anybody want to take a guess? I'm doing a lot of talking. Anybody want to take a guess about what that means, why that's important? The flow of work?
No, I want you to talk.
Because things change. That's the Agile, you fail early, fail often, or fail early, or so you can course correct.
Yep, so it's important that you're watching where things are going through the flow. So if things change, you can know where it is and catch it, right? And if things get stuck, then all the things behind it get stuck. So it's really important to make sure that work is flowing through the system. Like if you are writing an article and you need help from Jimmy in the other department and then it gets stuck, then things aren't flowing through, right? It's blocked. So it's really important in Kanban to make sure that things are flowing through the system and things don't get stuck. I should add that Kanban was originally created in Japan. It is a Japanese word that means visualize work. And it was created by Toyota, and they used it in their assembly lines. So they started with visualizing their workflow in their factory and then making sure that their people didn't work on too many parts at a time. And one thing that they implemented that was absolutely shocking to everybody else in the industry is each person had a chance, had like a pull line where they could pull and an alarm would go off and everything would freeze. Because if they got a blockage that was blocking the flow from the rest of the work, it would slow the whole chain down. So they managed for flow. They made it so even the lowest paid, most junior person putting a screw in a widget could freeze the whole line and say, I'm having a problem, it's going to block the flow, and it increased their output by like, I don't know, 300%, because they were focused on the flow of work through, not saying one is more important than the other, or it doesn't matter if that little screw gets stuck, I'm working on this important machinery part. It's very important that the flow of work goes through everything.
And when you say flow, does that mean not having multiple branches? It means having one stream?
That's limiting work in progress, and they're definitely related, Denise, yeah.
Oh,
Because if you have 5 things in flight and 2 of them, like if you have a 5 times the chance something's going to get stuck, right?
mm-hmm.
If you're collaborating with somebody and they're busy working on something else, and this thing just like you put it on hold and then you pick up something else and that thing on hold is still there, and like it becomes a mess real fast.
Yeah. So my experience with the team, I think they had multiple flows, tasks, and
This is, I think, the hardest concept for most companies to get is flow and limiting work in progress, because managers want their resources 100% utilized, right? They want everybody working as hard as they possibly can, and nothing will slow them down faster. But it's counterintuitive for me to allow people to not work as hard as they can 100% of the time. As a manager, I want everybody to work hard all the time, but that slows them down because then it impedes flow. So it's really, really hard to get companies to understand this.
Yeah, the only thing I think would be rework. That's what I see a lot of in Agile, is you just redo the same thing over and over again because it wasn't planned out or it wasn't broken down. And you just, you do the same, you work on the same feature sprint after sprint because it was just, I don't know, that happened. I see that a lot.
So
That would be the
frustrating.
benefit of explaining the business of managing flow, I think.
Yep. Yeah,
I'll defer to
totally.
you.
And communicating with the product owner. Like we were talking about how in the beginning they used to kind of pitch it over the fence. There's still a lot of that happens in companies. People think they're so busy, they're just going to go heads down and write out the requirements that they need and then hand it to you and then go off and do something else. They're have multiple things in progress, right? Rather than I'm going to work on this thing and talk to the people who are going to work on it so they understand why it matters to our customer and what it is, and we all are on the same page, and then they can go work on it. Instead, they try to make it faster by just pitching it, and then everything slows down. There are so many things that are counterintuitive like that. And just kind of against human nature, I think. All right, the 4th step is make process policies explicit. So that is to make sure that the team has an agreement on what our processes are and that we said them out loud. So if I'm an editor for a magazine, we explicitly say that I'm going to review every article before it goes into publication. And we make that clear. It's not just assumed. You can write that down on the worksheet to make policies explicit. Make sure that everybody understands them. That ensures flow too, because I'm not guessing what to do next. We all have an agreement of what the steps are to get something out the door. And then the 5th thing is to recognize process improvement opportunities. I think we were talking before a lot about how like companies aren't doing things the way that they could be done, and it's frustrating, and we're redoing work. And the team should have the ability and the power to say, this isn't working, it's stupid, we need to do something different.
I think the buzzword that all the companies are using now is digital transformation, right?
Mhm.
For
Mhm.
overall process improvement. So that
Yep.
they're trying to they improve the process from inside and out and top and bottom, and calling it
Right.
digital transformation. And that's I'm
Mhm.
hearing that in several companies, several
Yeah.
genres.
It sounds big and exciting, right?
Yeah.
But then if I tell you that means your contractors who you're paying $60 an hour aren't going to be working at 100% of their capacity all the time, then they go, wait a minute, that's not what I wanted. Well, that's what your transformation is, buddy.
Yeah.
Like they don't want to change, right? Hard. Really hard. Any questions about this? I know I'm throwing a lot at you. And then just to visualize a Kanban board, I have a picture of one here so you can see things going through the flow, the swim lanes, with the explicit policy of requested, in progress, and done. Yep. So for checking out, what is one thing you learned today, and how do you think you can apply it at work? Anybody care to share anything you learned?
I'm already thinking of where I can put a Kanban board, and I have a board right next to me every day, so I'm already thinking of ways that I can chunk the information. I was, I work in DoD, and one of the things that the government has tried to do lately is kind of force programs to do Agile, like something called earned value. And so they want us to chunk the tasks, and they will pay for the task via 6-month milestones that are basically chunked even further into 2-week increments. And so you present them this entire integrated schedule, master schedule, and with tiny little increments. And it's basically Agile, but it's forced on you. So you have to learn, and it takes a lot of program management and project management and to come up with those milestones to make sure that you're on track, right? And count every single hour and every single manpower and the number of resources that you have to allocate to that task and everything. So it's even showing up in Department of Defense. So this is definitely useful. I think we lost you, Sarah.
Oh, I was on mute. Sorry,
Okay.
because I was getting a drink of water. I was just saying I've used Kanban boards when I was making Thanksgiving dinner. Like I literally got sticky notes and put them on the wall so that like I could know, okay, the gravy's in process, don't let it burn, and the stuffing is not made yet, so I got to start that. It could be really helpful for visualizing work and knowing where stuff is at. I use it all the time.
I like Lori's reminder about being part of the team, and it emphasizes how simmer down. It emphasizes how hard we have to work when we're shared among various teams, but because we need the relationships. And certainly in something as dynamic and fulminating as Agile, you got to vote with your body every day. If you're not there, you're missing out. You become less effective. And I don't know how you come up with the extra hours of the day. I always felt that Lockheed Martin wanted 125%, that my family needed 125%. STC needed about 125% also. And it's like, where do you generate the hours? How do you manifest yourself to do adequately at any of those? But
Absolutely.
to be effective at work, you got to vote with your body. You got to show up and be part of the team and get the relationships you need, or you're out the door at some point.
That's great advice, WC. Thank you.
I taught you well.
You weren't always there, Lori.
I thought what's new to me, because I've been doing this for a while, was that statement that you made, Agile is supposed to value the importance of people. It's about the culture. I did not get that from the activities I've seen going on.
I agree with you, Lori. I found the same. The company I contracted for saw it strictly as, just total process oriented, and the individuals did not matter, and they wondered why everybody was demoralized and not
Breaks my
accomplishing
heart.
Yeah, it was just incredibly. Everybody was very happy when I joined the team, and they had a Scrum master who, after interviewing everybody for the first time, the team just sort of crashed and never recovered over the course of several months. And I don't know how much he was on 4 teams. I don't know the pressures that that person was facing. I just don't know. But there was a push from above him that had nothing to do with the people. Again, I'm not a developer, and it was a team that was devoted to maintaining a website, and they didn't use Kanban, they used another process.
Breaks my heart when that happens. It happens a lot.
Yeah.
'Cause it's the latest, corporate buzzword. So they try to install this process on top of everything they've already got going on.
Yeah.
And it just adds a bunch of crap to people's plate that they don't need.
I found
Not how
that
it's supposed to be, I promise.
there's a complete lack. I felt like it was unfocused. We had to, I've managed LMS migrations. It's not quite, there's certain very basic chunks, and I tended to compartmentalize, which doesn't always fit well, I think, with the way this company interpreted Agile. And they weren't getting it done because the one piece they had to develop that was custom and not part of the cloud we were going to migrate to was just a registration page. They didn't listen. It was very frustrating. And
Yeah.
they just decided not to get it done. They took weeks, and because they had so much else to do, they were overwhelmed. They knew what to do, but they were overwhelmed. I don't think this was being followed at all.
I really love someone actually saying and writing down individuals and interactions over processes and tools. I love that. I absolutely enjoyed a team meeting with my clients this morning, where usually things are very methodical and process driven. They're working on something that they've been told is a green field, meaning they can make it whatever and however they want. And that's how it actually was. It was the individuals and interactions over processes and tools. They were, manifesting that in their meeting. They were working together and figuring it out. And I just so enjoyed that.
That is amazing.
Sarah, I really appreciate the way you presented this. I think I'm finally getting an understanding of what Agile is. And I think hearing the discussion is really helpful. Because somebody mentioned I don't quite have this. I wasn't part of a team I wasn't in the professional world when things were being developed in the waterfall method. And that sounds, just hearing it described, it sounds really inefficient, but if that's what you have, then that's what you do. So as you've been describing the Agile process mindset, I've been thinking back to other jobs I've had, and I can think of a previous position where there were some aspects where it was very waterfall or develop the whole thing and then push it out. But then I think it was also moving towards, without using the language of agile. And so it helps to kind of reframe some of those experiences. And what I'm understanding is that when you're working in agile or the point isn't to get 100% polished thing deliverable in 2 weeks. The point is to get something out and then take a look at it and assess, and then
Exactly.
okay, so that makes sense, and I can see that now in a lot of areas of my school, of, like I said, jobs I've in, and then just kind of how I process things. So this is really useful. Thank you.
Good. I didn't want to go over the 12 principles because it's just a lot of content, but one of them is optimizing the amount of work that's not done, which I really love because it recognizes that what someone thinks they need might not be what they need. And if you're showing it to them in little bits, you will probably, at least in my experience, get to the point where you're 80% of the way of what they thought they wanted, like what the project plan would have been. And they'd be like, you know what, that's good enough. We have this other thing that's more important. Let's cut this and move on. And so that's part of how teams go faster, is when they're allowed to develop in that way. They can still meet what needs to be done, but do less. So this kind of ties into what you were saying. Anybody else care to share?
Yeah. I just want to say I'm also someone who's new to just learning about Agile and methodologies. Yeah, so this was really just a good primer into it. And like Amy said, it helped to visualize it, and just hearing it in a simple way really helped. Since I haven't had too much experience, I really haven't had any experience working with these methodologies. So I really enjoyed the presentation.
Great, thanks, Sam. One thing I didn't mention that is really, really important to me personally is how vulnerable it is. And developers won't talk about it because it's feelings, and most of them don't like feelings. But to build something and show it to one, it's like when you write a piece of paper for the first time and then you show it to someone and you're like, oh dear God, please let them like it. Please let them not think I'm an idiot. Like, that's what it's like for them every time they build a piece of software. We just don't talk about it. So that's why there is so much process, and like, we have to get it absolutely perfect before we show it to people, because it requires that courage and vulnerability to show something to someone that's not completely, totally perfect. And that's part of the challenge. And I think as students working in groups and as professionals, if you can learn the courage to show something that's half-baked and to recognize that you have talent and you're doing the best that you can, and if they judge you, that's on them, not you. Like, that's a really big foundation of this too, that I want to make sure I mention.
Pencils down is important.
Pencils down, is that what you said?
Pencils down is important, yeah. At some point, you just gotta let go of it, right? And send it over the fence, and then sprint again, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's where the 2-week time box comes in handy, because you got to show it at the end of that 2 weeks, no matter where you're at.
Yep.
Sarah,
And it
how do
can
you
be
handle the
exhausting,
fact,
like you were saying, Amy.
I was going to say, Sarah, how do you handle the fact of being outnumbered?
What do you mean?
By that, I mean, I know, at least in my Lockheed Martin experience, there are like 50 different kinds of engineers. And then you've got finance people that, along with management, that have fiscal responsibility and authority. And at the end of the day, you are probably the single representative of say the writing branch. So even though you want to work in teamwork, you still have to work with the fact that there's a gang of them and they don't understand or appreciate what you do. Teamwork, no matter how you try, how do you bridge that?
For me, I've found modeling to be really powerful. If I can show up and like be courageous and show something that's half done and admit, like, I'm really struggling with this because you've been working on this for a week and I have no idea what you're working on. I found that to be like, once you start to open up and show them who you really are and what you really think, and like you were saying before, WC, building relationships, that makes all the difference.
Yeah, I tried to bring humor in as much as possible, because particularly after we could never get the professional software that we wanted. Basically, we got standardized to use Microsoft Office. And so suddenly I'm dealing with engineers who have the same tools that I've got. And so my value add is,
and they
even
all
less
think they can
apparent.
write.
Even
Oh my
less
God.
apparent because they have the same tools. All I could do was look at them and say, you don't realize how hard it is to make you look good.
I love it.
Wow.
It seemed to work for a while at least.
I That's a tough one. I worked for one division that allowed her clients to do all the writing, and I kept telling her, you can't. And then one night I had moved on to another agency, and I had a good relation. The person was very smart, capable, good tops in the industry, but she was still starting and learning like I was. Anyway, she sent me a module, and they had 3 different sets of instructions for one slide, a surgical procedure on a slide. It was recorded, captioned, and then notes below. None of them matched because she allowed them to do their own writing. Yeah, I said, I can't fix this. It's too, you want it fixed by tomorrow. I have questions, you have to value the writing, and because she just didn't. Her client said no, so she just backed off.
Once upon a time, I was standing in line at Tim Hortons, our Canadian coffee shop, and the guy behind me struck up a conversation. He said, I just quit my job. And I said, oh, what were you doing? He said, I was an engineer. And I said, why did you quit your job? And he said, because they asked me to do technical writing. And then he said, so what do you do? And I said, I'm a technical writer.
That's a great story. It's a very
I've been
difficult
lucky
job that
that
everybody thinks they can do.
I think I've been
Sorry, go
lucky
ahead,
because
Lily.
the developers I've worked with always seem to appreciate what I bring to the table. And, you have to learn how to present their oopses in a way that doesn't challenge them. But after I do that, then they're cool. They're like, oh, thank you.
Right. Yep. I want to honor everybody's time. I know it's getting late on the East Coast. I'm not sure where everyone is. But thank you so much. This was a delight to meet with you all. And I remember why I love this group so much. I've missed you. Thank you for having me. Have a good night.
Thank you,
Anything to
Sarah.
close, Alex?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Sure, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And once again, we hope to see you next month at the joint UCF FTC meeting. John, Amy did tell us a little bit about that meeting next month, so we will see you then. And then once again at our March meeting regarding all things Bitcoin and all that good stuff. So
Yeah, email me your questions. I just put it in the chat, my email in the chat again.
absolutely.
If you think of anything.
Her email is stc.jessica.nealon@gmail.com. If you have any questions about anything with having to do with I lost the word.
Bitcoin?
Blockchain and
Cryptocurrency and
Oh,
blockchain.
crypto and BitChain. There you go. Well, yeah, everybody have a good night. Hope you enjoyed. And thank you so much, Sarah. We always glad to have you, and don't be a stranger. I
Definitely.
know John is trying to invite former FTC presidents, so he might be reaching out to you for next month's also. So
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody.
all right, thank you.
Okay, Northerners, stay warm.
Everyone.
And Sarah, you might still be the host if you want to stop the recording,
Oh.
or yeah.
Yes, that will stop it.